Welcome to episode 293 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Law Sky. It's August 20, 1916. Stockholm, the Olympic Stadium. Around 16,000 people are watching Sweden play a group of Americans who have crossed the Atlantic in the middle of the First World War. Sweden score after 7 minutes. Then Dick Spalding equalizes. Charles Ellis puts the Americans ahead. Harry Cooper makes it 3-1. Sweden pull one back. Final score, Sweden 2, United States 3. And with that, something rather important has happened. The United States men's national team has been born in Sweden. But how did we get here? American soccer is much older than the American national team, and that distinction matters. Long before there was a countrywide football structure, there were soccer towns. Kearny, Harrison, East Newark, Fall River, St. Louis, Philadelphia, Bethlehem. Places where immigration and industry put football communities beside factories, mills, and working-class neighborhoods. One of the earliest was West Hudson in northern New Jersey. Scottish workers arrived for the textile industry. Clark Thread Company became particularly important. Its employees formed ONT, a formidable factory team that won the first 3 American Cups. And in 1884, the American Football Association was created. It sounded national. It really wasn't. It was overwhelmingly an organization of the Northeast. Which brings us to America's curious first attempt at international football. November 28, 1885, Clark Field in Kearny. The AFA assembles a team calling itself the United States to play a Canadian selection organized by Canada's Western Football Association. Canada win 1-0. 1 year later, on November 25, 1886, they do it again, same ground. And this time, the Americans win 3-2. But neither match is recognized today as a full U.S. international, and you can understand why. Every American player in 1885 came from a New Jersey club. The Canadian organization was similarly regional, essentially Western Ontario. These were international matches before either country really possessed the national machinery necessary to create a national team. And then, nothing. Not because Americans stopped playing soccer, far from it. The game spreads. Fall River becomes another great industrial hotbed. St. Louis develops its own distinctive soccer culture. Philadelphia grows. And by the 1910s, Bethlehem Steel has built one of the strongest teams in the country. Even at the 1904 Olympics in St. Louis, however, the American entries are clubs rather than genuine United States national teams. The problem is institutional. Who actually governs American soccer? The old AFA fades away in 1899, then revives in 1906. But it remains heavily Eastern and increasingly associated with professional football. And other groups wanted amateur football represented too. They want national expansion, and crucially, they want America connected not merely to England and Scotland, but to FIFA. So enter Thomas W. Cahill, born in New York, raised largely in St. Louis, athlete, club organizer, administrator, editor of the Spalding Soccer Football Guide, and eventually one of the central architects of American soccer. In 1911, a rival body appears, the American Amateur Football Association. Its president is Dr. G. Randolph Manning. Its secretary is Cahill. And almost immediately, they make an audacious move. They apply to FIFA. So Cahill crosses the Atlantic in 1912. Destination, Stockholm. FIFA is meeting there alongside the Stockholm Olympics. But there is a problem. The old AFA also claims to speak for American football. FIFA effectively tells Cahill, go home, sort this out, come back with one organization representing the whole game. Negotiations between the rival American bodies fail, but support begins moving toward Cahill's camp. And on April 5, 1913, representatives gather at New York's Astor House. They create the United States Football Association, the organization we now know as U.S. Soccer. FIFA grants provisional recognition that August. Full recognition follows in 1914. And the new federation creates the National Challenge Cup, today's U.S. Open Cup, giving American soccer something approaching a genuine national competition. During Cahill's 1912 trip to Stockholm, he established a relationship with C.L. Kornerup, the Swedish football administrator, at FIFA vice president. Cahill later sent him the latest Spalding Guide, and in early 1916 a letter arrives from Sweden. Would the Americans like to send a team across the Atlantic? There's even a $4,000 guarantee to finance the trip. This was not random. The documentary trail leads directly from international football politics in Stockholm in 1912 to international football in Stockholm 4 years later. But now there's one enormous complication. It's 1916. Europe is at war. The Berlin Olympic Games have been cancelled. Sweden and Norway are neutral. So is the United States. And Bethlehem Steel appear to have been Sweden's preferred American visitors. They are the reigning National Challenge Cup and American Cup champions. But Bethlehem Steel Company refuses to risk sending its champion football team across the Atlantic. And that's understandable. The company itself is supplying war material to Britain, France and Russia. And only the previous year, a German U-boat had sunk the Lusitania. After the Sussex crisis, Germany had given the United States the so-called Sussex Pledge in May 1916, agreeing to restrict submarine attacks. But crossing the Atlantic in July 1916 is hardly a pleasure cruise. And there is a remarkable parallel. The Americans sailed from Hoboken on July 26 aboard the Frederick VIII, named after the Danish king from 1906 to 1912. And while they are crossing the ocean on August 4, the United States and Denmark signed the treaty under which America will acquire the Danish West Indies, today's U.S. Virgin Islands. One important strategic reason? Washington fears Germany could eventually seize those islands and use their magnificent Caribbean position as a naval or submarine base. The concern of being torpedoed was very real, and there absolutely is a historical parallel. Neutral America is simultaneously building relationships with Scandinavia and worrying about what German submarine warfare means for American security. Same week, same war, very different kinds of diplomacy. The footballers keep sailing. There are only 14 of them. No national tryout camp. No months of preparation. The USFA's National and International Games Committee simply selects a squad. Almost everybody comes from the Northeast. Only Matt Diedrichson of St. Louis breaks the geographic monopoly. But something has changed since 1885. 12 of the 14 players are American-born. Captain Tommy Swords comes from Fall River. James Ford and John Hermansley represent the Kearny tradition. Neil Clark and Thomas Murray come from mighty Bethlehem Steel. Dick Spaulding from Philadelphia. Charles Ellis from Brooklyn. Harry Cooper from New York. And Thomas Cahill goes as manager. They reach Christiania, today's Oslo, on August 7, Stockholm the next day. And on August 15, they finally play. Not Sweden yet. A Stockholm city selection called Tigrarna, the Tigers. Olympic Stadium. Roughly 20,000 people. The Americans draw 1-1. Hermansley scores. King Gustav V is watching. And at halftime, the king summons Cahill to the royal box. He thanks the Americans for undertaking such an extraordinary sporting journey during wartime and talks about the friendship the competition can create between Sweden and the United States. This is already more than a football tour. 5 days later comes the official one, August 20, Sweden against the United States. Konrad Törnqvist scores after 7 minutes, Sweden 1-0. 22 minutes, Dick Spaulding equalizes. The first official goal in US MNT history. And what a goal it was. Just inside the Swedish half, Spaulding sends a high ball in towards the Swedish goal. The ball hits the wet grass and bounces over keeper Fridtjof Rydén and in goal under the crossbar. 1-1 at halftime. Then Charles Ellis scores in the 53rd minute, Harry Cooper in the 68th. 3-1 America. Törnqvist scores again with 9 minutes remaining, but the Americans hold on. Sweden 2, United States 3. The hastily assembled Americans have beaten an established European national team away from home. And the tour keeps going. They lose 3-0 to an AIK Djurgårdens selection, beat Örgryte 2-1 in Gothenburg, draw 1-1 with Norway in Christiania, despite finishing with only 9 men because injured players cannot be replaced. Then they return to Stockholm and beat the AIK Djurgårdens side 2-1. 6 matches, 3 wins, 2 draws, 1 defeat. 9 goals scored, 9 conceded. But so what? Was this the beginning of the USMNT? Oh yes. Was this the beginning of a continuous USMNT? Not remotely. There were no 1916 Olympics. Then in April 1917, the United States enters the First World War. Domestic teams loses players to military service. International travel becomes even harder. And after the Scandinavian tour, the United States does not field another senior national team until the 1924 Olympics. So in one sense, the momentum disappears immediately. But institutionally, something important survives. The USFA has proved that it can assemble a genuinely national selection, send it abroad, represent the United States, deal with another federation, and compete. The relationship survived too. Bethlehem Steel finally tours Scandinavia in 1919. 4 members of the 1916 team go with them. American soccer has entered their international network. And then begins a pattern that may explain much of the next century. American soccer develops in waves. The 1920s bring the American Soccer League and a genuine professional boom. Cahill himself helps create that league. Then comes the soccer war between the league and the federation, and then the Great Depression. The United States still reaches the World Cup semi-final in 1930. But then comes another institutional own goal. And we covered that in episode 276. American IOC member General Charles Sherrill pushed the hardline over Olympic amateurism that eventually helped leave football off the Los Angeles 1932 program. Not because Los Angeles simply hated soccer. It was an IOC-FIFA jurisdictional fight, but an American official was absolutely central to the ultimatum. Then came another flash, 1950, Belo Horizonte, United States 1, England 0, one of the greatest World Cup upsets ever. And then, another 40 years before America returns to a World Cup. 1967 brings another attempt at a national professional game, 2 rival leagues, then the merger that creates the NASL. Pelé arrives, then New York Cosmos explode, then the entire league collapses in 1984. We told that boom and bust story back in episode 37. Finally comes the sequence that sticks. The United States win the rights to host the 1994 World Cup. Major League Soccer follows. First season, 1996. This time the professional league survives. Academies develop, stadiums get built, clubs become permanent institutions, and American players have somewhere stable to grow. And in 2026, the World Cup came back. The United States win their group, beat Bosnia and Herzegovina in the round of 32, reached the last 16. Then Belgium win 4-1 and sent the hosts home. Which brings us to the question Americans have been asking for generations. A country this big, this wealthy, this obsessed with sport, why has it never become one of the dominant powers in men's soccer? There are many answers, but perhaps August 20, 1916 offers one of them. Population is not infrastructure. For much of its history, America did not lack footballers. It lacked continuity. Kearny was strong. Bethlehem was strong. St. Louis was strong. The 1920s were strong. The 1950 team produced a miracle. NASL produced a spectacle. But then, repeatedly, the machinery broke. Leagues disappeared, institutions fought, international schedules vanished, development pathways reset. Other football countries spent generations continuously refining the machine that turns children into elite players. America spent much of the same century repeatedly rebuilding the machine. MLS does not guarantee American supremacy, neither does hosting a World Cup, but continuity gives the United States something its pioneers rarely had, the opportunity to build from one generation to the next, rather than starting over. Before we go, 3 things to take away from August 20, 1916. First, American international soccer did not really begin in 1916. The 1885 and 86 matches against Canada reveal an older football culture, but still one organized regionally rather than nationally. Second, the Scandinavian tour was not an accident. Thomas Cahill went to Stockholm in 1912 seeking FIFA recognition. That relationship eventually produced Kornerup's invitation, Swedish financing, and America's first official international 4 years later. Third, the 3-2 victory was a beginning without immediate continuity. World War stopped the national team almost as soon as it had started. That stop-start rhythm would characterize American men's soccer for much of the next century. On this day, 1916, Sweden scored first. Dick Spalding scored America's first official goal. Charles Ellis and Harry Cooper followed, and the United States won 3-2. The national team of the United States of America was born abroad, in Stockholm, in the middle of a world war. That is all for episode 293 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. Tomorrow, August 21, 1965. For 77 years, an English Football League match begins with 11 players, and if one gets hurt, tough luck. Then, finally, somebody's allowed to come off, somebody else is allowed to come on. The substitute has arrived. Stay tuned.